This week, news broke that the Trump White House has been quietly drawing up what officials are calling a naughty and nice list of NATO allies, ranking European countries based on whether or not they helped the US during its war in Iran. Spain, France, and the UK are all on the naughty list. White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly told Politico, quote, "The United States will remember," which is, we'd say, somewhat unusual diplomatic language for an alliance. So in this video, we're going to explain what this list actually means, why Trump is doing it now, and what it could mean for the future of NATO. If you love staying informed and want some of the best reporting on YouTube, then subscribe and ring the bell for more. So let's start with some context, because this list didn't quite emerge out of nowhere. The concept was actually first floated by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth back in December 2025, when he proposed that, quote, model allies should receive special favor, while those failing to meet expectations would face consequences. That framework was then finalized ahead of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's visit to Washington earlier this month, and was first reported by Politico on Tuesday. The criteria, broadly speaking, are twofold: how much an ally spends on defense, and whether it backed the U.S. during Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran that began in late February. On the nice list, you have Poland, which is expected to spend around 4.8% of GDP on defense this year and hosts roughly 10,000 U.S. troops at fully Polish-funded facilities. Romania, which granted American forces expanded access to Mihail Kogalnicianu Air Base during the Iran War, and the Baltic states. On the naughty list, you have Spain, which explicitly blocked U.S. aircraft from using Moron Air Base and Rota during the Iran operation, forcing tanker fleets to be rerouted to Ramstein in Germany, France, which stalled U.S. requests for support, and the UK, which similarly declined specific American asks during the conflict. It's also worth noting that Italy reportedly denied U.S. aircraft permission to land at Sigonella because Washington hadn't bothered to ask in advance. Trump himself posted on Truth Social, in all caps, that NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. So, what does being on the naughty list actually entail? Well, broadly speaking, 3 punitive measures are reportedly under consideration. The first is troop redeployments away from the naughty countries, which would directly hit bases in Germany, Italy, and the UK, with forces potentially shifted eastwards to Romania and Poland. The second is the cancellation or scaling back of joint military exercises, which would meaningfully degrade interoperability between American and European forces. And the third is restrictions on U.S. defense technology sales, which would land particularly hard on the UK's F-35 program, given that Britain still has roughly 90 aircraft left to procure out of a planned 138, and lacks any independent software sovereignty over the jets it already operates. Crucially, none of this requires congressional approval, meaning Trump can move unilaterally. So how is Europe responding? Well, on Wednesday and Thursday, EU leaders held an informal summit in Cyprus specifically to discuss Article 42.7, the EU's own mutual defense clause, as a kind of operational backup to NATO's Article 5. Cyprus, it's worth noting, is one of the few EU countries not in NATO, and was itself hit by a drone strike on a UK military facility last month, which gives it a fairly direct interest in operationalizing 42.7. The clause has only ever been invoked once in EU history, by France after the 2015 Bataclan attacks, so any attempt to actually build a working framework around it would be a significant precedent. France and Germany are reportedly leading the push, with tabletop exercises overseen by Kaja Kallas penciled in for May. And as we've covered in previous videos, this also ties into the wider French-Polish nuclear deterrence cooperation, where French Rafale jets and Polish pilots are now training together on dispersed deployment scenarios. The political cover for all this is real. An April Polling Europe survey found that 86% of Europeans support developing independent EU defense capabilities. And in Spain, Italy, Belgium, and Germany, more respondents now view the United States as a threat than view China as one, which is, we think, a fairly remarkable reversal. So, what does all this mean for Trump and for NATO? Well, the way we see it, this strategy may be self-defeating in a way the White House appears not to have considered. The countries on the naughty list collectively hold the physical infrastructure the U.S. relies on to project power. Spain controls the Strait of Gibraltar. France controls the airspace corridors to Africa. The UK hosts the Faslane submarine base, where Britain's nuclear deterrent runs on US-owned Trident missiles, making the relationship deeply intertwined. And Germany hosts Ramstein, which acted as the continuous logistical bridge for Operation Epic Fury, alongside Landstuhl, the largest US military hospital outside American soil. Punishing these specific allies degrades the very capabilities Washington would need in any future confrontation with Russia or China. Spain has already demonstrated this in practice by denying base access during the Iran war and forcing the US to absorb the operational cost itself. Nonetheless, the naughty and nice list isn't just Trump-era theater. It's a formal restructuring of how the United States values its allies, and the Pentagon is reportedly already drafting the first phase of redeployments for the summer. Whether the Cyprus summit produces a real Article 42.7 framework or just another round of communiques will probably define European security policy for the next decade. Either way, the alliance that defined the post-war order is being quietly dismantled list by list.